All right, let's see if this starts it. I am Leonard French, your favorite copyright attorney. Should be coming live to starting stream. This is a good thing. Let's see if we can get a link going here. Do we have a link? Let's try this, putting a link in announcements here. Everyone, let's talk about the Vox Adpocalypse. And go. All right, how are we doing, everyone? I have a serious topic to discuss with you this evening, and it was eating at me all day. I saw the articles this morning, and I just need to talk about it. I researched the crap out of this, and if I've got it wrong, I need to know. But so far, I really don't see this as being the big deal. Like the first part, the Crowder thing being as big of a deal as the second part, which was the reaction to the Crowder thing, which, wait a second, is the Vox Adpocalypse really connected to this other demonetization effort? So let's just talk about this. This is not, I'm not doing any special effects or music or, celebration or anything. This is a serious topic because it seems like YouTube is now suddenly going through a massive demonetization thing. And earlier today, we were talking about the Vox Adpocalypse. Actually, it wasn't even the Vox Adpocalypse at that point. It was just the Maza Crowder situation. If you're not familiar with what I'm talking about... Oh, hi, Mom. If you're not familiar with what I'm talking about, what has happened is Steven Crowder has been demonetized after being evaluated for a permanent deplatforming or permanent platform ban, after a reporter named Carlos Maza, or Meza, I don't know how to pronounce it, I apologize if I get it wrong, seemed to call for an investigation into whether Crowder had harassed and doxed and said some mean names, called some racial slur or homophobic slurs, some mean names, in his videos or worse against Maza. And if you go and watch Maza's videos, which we're not going to do here because this is just our version of the discussion, if you go and watch Maza's videos, or rather Philip DeFranco does a very good summary that has all of those little parts in it. If you go and watch Maza's videos, he does seem to say that any of the harassment or doxing that he gets from the internet seems to come from Steven Crowder's fans and therefore must come from Steven Crowder. Steven Crowder must be responsible for it. And Steven Crowder, therefore, is guilty of targeted harassment, cyberbullying, and since Carlos Maza was allegedly doxed, that is somehow then automatically connected to this. And so I said, okay, this sounds terrible. Let's research this. And I simply began asking for links. Anybody send me a link where Crowder says these terrible things, to his audience. And the real picture started to paint itself. And I want, if I'm wrong, my audience, please tell me. Please show me the evidence. Show me the links. This is a law channel. I am a lawyer. If I was taking this to court, I can't just say to a judge, well, my client told me to tell you that Carlos Maza was doxed by... Yeah, no. The judge wants to see the evidence, and we present the evidence to the jury. Am I holding this whole Maza thing to a level of legality? No. But just let's do basic investigation here. Where is the evidence of what has happened? Just someone show me Steven Crowder telling his fans to go and harass Carlos Maza. I have seen zero evidence of it. you can make the argument all day that using homophobic slurs in his videos should be enough to cause his deplatforming, or should be enough to cause his demonetization or whatever. And that's up to YouTube, and YouTube can do that, and this is not a government free speech issue or anything. However, this is a creator concern issue. I'm a creator, and what if I say something that someone is offended by? I'm not going to call someone homophobic slurs. That's not in my nature, but I've definitely called people morons or something like that before. So where is this line, and do we really want to draw it at calling Maza what Crowder called him? Now, I'm really not a fan of repeating these insults, but just because it's for our discussion, I'll try to refer to the words. Crowder said a rather large number of phrases that started with "the gay reporter." So yeah, one could probably be offended if one is offended by that, by calling someone out as not just a reporter, but a gay reporter. Okay, so that's one level of offense. I don't know if that's deserving of a platform ban, but that example is mixed in with the other examples in order to make it appear like there's dozens and dozens of times that he has called this man a homophobic slur, when in reality most of the dozens of times are him saying a gay reporter. And he might be doing it in an elevated voice or a lispy voice or something in order to mock him. I'm not defending that. That is offensive, but that's not... Is that really the level where we deplatform someone? Okay, well then he calls him a lispy queer at one point. And I did find evidence that Maza has referred to himself as a queer. Now, yes, there's a whole thing with the other word, the N-word, where you can't just go use that. But I'm not really on the side of adding to this list of banned words. Like, we don't really need to be adding to the list of words that are banned. You have to know the word. You have to fully understand the word and the concept. You have to understand the ins and outs of when it's offensive and when it's not, and you're not allowed to use it. I'm not really a big fan of adding more words to that. So I'm not really a big fan of the argument that we're going to add the word queer to the list of words that are banned at the level of the N-word. Yes, I can see why the N-word is so offensive. I'm not calling for that to be changed or anything, but it doesn't seem like it's a good thing to have words that are banned. Okay, well, this isn't the government banning it. YouTube can choose whether or not it wants to ban that word or not, and it chose not to ban that word. Then there's this other part, though. I watched Steven Crowder's video, and I've been the subject of name-calling before. This didn't seem to be at the same level of malicious, hateful name-calling. Does Steven Crowder call Maza homophobic names like lispy queer and a few others, little gay or something like that? Yeah, these are demeaning phrases, but this is behind the lens. You don't have to watch. You can turn it off. You can go make your own video complaining about it, which I believe he did. And I don't think anybody had a problem with any of that. But now it's reached the part where, and this is where I start to have a problem with it, Maza doesn't return fire by saying, look at the harass, or look at the name calling. He instead says, look at how I'm being harassed. So we've now gone from homophobic name calling behind the lens to harassment. And then if you read it was a CNN article, there's an article or two there, Maza has responded and said that he's the one that asked YouTube to look into whether Crowder deserved to be deplatformed or otherwise dealt with for community guidelines violations for harassing and doxing Maza. For Crowder causing the harassment, not just did someone on the YouTube platform who makes comments on Crowder's video harass Maza? No. The question was, did Crowder cause the harassment, like by calling for it or something? And did that calling for the harassment result directly in the doxing? And that is what was presented to YouTube, and that is what YouTube has said is not targeted harassment. Now, I brought up YouTube's policies, like some have on their videos, and I thought this was very important here. The hateful content policy is that we don't target, or we don't support content that promotes or condones violence. So does calling somebody a name condone violence? I don't think so. I think it's a really reaching argument, and I think it's betraying of one's biases to try and say that name calling behind the lens is somehow condoning violence. But maybe it could be this harassment or cyberbullying, right? It does say it's not okay to post abusive videos and comments on YouTube. If harassment crosses the lines into a malicious attack, it can be reported and may be removed. In other cases, users may be mildly annoying or petty and should just be ignored. So did this really cross the line into being a malicious attack? The other definition that I saw was whether or not this was hurtful content. And everyone was very focused on hurtful. Was Maza hurt by the offensive homophobic comments? Maybe, but in our society, to me, my humble opinion or my belief system is that that's on Maza. A behind the lens insult is not the same as someone putting you in fear of imminent assault. Is not the same thing as someone showing up to your private home or private place of whatever. Is not the same as someone calling your private phone number or calling your or receiving email to a private email address that wasn't supposed to be published. And all of that would only really be able to happen with doxing, and that was any doxing that happened is unfortunate, and I'm totally on Maza's side that doxing sucks. But I did not see any evidence that tied Crowder to the doxing. So again, I'm unclear as to why Crowder deserves to be, 1, completely deplatformed, or 2, at least demonetized. Now, my disagreement here is not at the level of YouTube can't do this. No. I'm not saying that any of these people have a legal claim against YouTube. I'm just talking ethereally now in the moral concept and as well as sort of our concepts of justice and fairness. Do we really do this to Steven Crowder? If it was you and you were trying to be just and fair, not just overreactive, because that's what I'm accusing everyone of, is being overreactive. If you were trying to be just and fair and unbiased, would you really feel that this is the case that defines harassment or bullying, cyber stalking, doxing? Or would you more feel that this was the case that defines name calling, and maybe we don't set the threshold at mere behind the lens name calling? Kurt has brought up the milkshake thing. So then there's a few things, nobody's clean, right? I mean, I'm sure even if you went through my tweets, I may have said something offensive. I don't know. I certainly don't think I've ever called anybody a homophobic slur or anything worse than that. But I've called people morons. Holy crap, that's like my favorite word, is to call people idiots or morons or stupid or something. Part of the problem is that I was called that name a lot when I was a kid. And so like that's like in my head as like, I'm an old man now and I'm going to call our people that name. But also like some of this really does seem so stupid to me. It seems so willfully ignorant, which really to me just deserves the stupid moniker. If you are willfully looking at this situation, intending it to come out one way or the other. Now, I know in my heart of hearts that I would really like to see justice and fairness win in this situation, but I'm not going into the situation assuming that I know what outcome is the just and fair outcome before I know all of the facts and circumstances involved, which is why I was looking for evidence that Crowder is some kind of massive scumbag. He might still be a massive scumbag in your eyes, but is he a massive scumbag that said, please go harass Maza? Or is he a guy that said, I found Maza's name and address or phone number, go have at him? Or, is he just a guy who called him a lispy queer? Not a nice name. Again, not a nice name, but if I'm looking at my people, if I'm looking at my community, and somebody calls one of my people a lispy queer, am I going to go to nuclear war over that? No. I'm going to defend that person. I might even ban the offender from my platform, which YouTube could have done. I feel my platform's different. I feel if someone was in my Discord, that's more personal. That's one-on-one. You're like in a group of people. Whereas YouTube is sort of this one-way platform. Comments could be offensive. Yes, we're not talking about the comments of the videos, at least not, again, Crowder inciting anyone. I didn't see any evidence of Crowder putting comments in the videos that said, go get Maza or something like that. Definitely made fun of Maza. Definitely mocked the heck out of Maza from time to time. But I didn't see any videos where Maza was the primary target of the entire, where mocking Maza in a malicious fashion was the entire premise of the entire video. Didn't seem like that. It seemed like they had some problems with him and then they moved on. Do I agree with Crowder's political viewpoint? No. I can't defend this guy's political viewpoint. I'm on the opposite side of the political spectrum. Or at least I'm more, center left or something like that. No issues there. This is my version of trying to be unbiased as well. Call me out on any bias you see as well. I like to argue about it, but what I don't like is when people refuse to provide evidence while maintaining their positions. If you have a position, you damn well better know why you're taking a hard position on something. And if you don't have a hard position on something, that's fine. Know that you have a soft position and that your position can be changed with evidence. That's the way to live an evidence-based life. And that's what I believe in, is living an evidence-based life. I have sort of realized that maybe I have a little bit of an addiction for knowledge, and maybe not everybody is so keen on having to know every goddamn thing in the entire world. But, so that's to each their own. But you can't then rely on your lack of knowledge as some sort of barrier to response or some sort of barrier from the consequences of making making unfounded accusations. So where are we with this? I don't like the fact that Maza had to, for whatever reason, lie. I'm going to call it a lie. That he had to lie to his colleagues and to his readers and viewers and say that Crowder was the one behind the harassment and ultimately the doxing. If you can read the articles, there's one that has the response from Maza, and Maza very clearly says that he reported the situation to YouTube as Crowder and his fan base harassing him. And then the very next paragraph says that the harassment led to the doxing. So there's nothing there saying that Crowder's not being accused of the doxing and the harassment. And so then YouTube responds to that by saying, we've conducted an investigation and didn't find harassment and doxing. We found hurtful language. And they do say the word hurtful. And then there was this big argument that we had all day on Twitter over whether or not it's just hurtful or whether it's hurtful content that has to target someone. Like, so in other words, if I say something offensive in my video and then move on to the next thing or whatever, is that the same as focusing on that offensive thing for the entire video or making the whole point of that video? I think it's rather perfectly fine to say something mildly offensive, to someone, like how can you ever, I might say that I believe in universal health care, and that might be offensive to someone. So there has to be a much more objective definition to this standard. And so that's what I think this Steven Crowder thing is about, is people upset that because Steven Crowder wasn't guilty of more, that somehow meant that the LGBT community loses. And I think those things are not mutually exclusive, or in other words, that they can coexist. I think the LGBT community can be unharmed by Crowder's mere name-calling, and those things can exist in the same universe. I don't think there has to be this scorched earth reaction. But then wait, is the scorched earth reaction really happening because of Vox? A couple sources I saw said that the Vox Adpocalypse is actually just incredibly bad timing on YouTube's part. That in literally the cresting of the wave of the Maza Crowder situation, YouTube announces a policy against hate speech and white supremacy. Why would you do that at exactly the same time? If you saw the Maza situation happening, maybe postpone your announcement or try to make it incredibly clear that these things are not related, because at first glance they appeared incredibly related. And it took a couple sources to convince me that they are probably not related. It's so hard not to be like blown away by the coincidence here. We're going to start deplatforming and demonetizing other channels. Now, some of these other channels are somewhat white supremacist or worse, completely white supremacist. I haven't researched them all. Some of these channels are what seem to be innocent channels. I saw one of the history channels was caught up in it. I saw another reporting channel that didn't seem to have any sort of racist or homophobic undertones. An activist channel that reports on homophobic things. They got deplatformed or demonetized. Not the same thing, by the way. These are two separate things and two entirely different kind of bans. Deplatforming is when you're banned from YouTube. That's what I mean by that. Like, you're not allowed on. Demonetization means you're allowed on, but you're not going to make any money from the platform. You're not going to get ads run that pay you. You're not going to be able to sell merchandise. You're not going to be able to have a join button or anything like that, or run super chats or whatever. So is deplatforming the reaction to Steven Crowder's homophobic slurs? And my position was no, it was not. Because if we were going to hold Steven Crowder to that standard, then a whole lot of people were going to get deplatformed for homophobic slurs. Should homophobic slurs be demonetized? Well, yeah. I don't imagine you're going to get away with homophobic slurs on really any other platform. But then here I'm concerned. I'm concerned about people who report on stuff like that. They're going to get automatically deplatformed or demonetized because of that, because they're reporting on it, because they have to use the phrases. I've said the phrases a couple times already. Does that mean I deserve to be deplatformed because I repeated the phrases? I don't think so, but... So these kinds of questions lead to stress and anxiety among YouTube creators, because we fear getting caught up in the fury, the outrage of it. It'd be one thing if all of these channels are clearly violating policy, and maybe many of them are. Again, I have not looked into every one of the other channels. I've just seen some complaining, well, actually a lot of complaining, and a couple of the complaints seemed to come from innocent channels. So that's mostly what I'm concerned about, is our channel and other channels like us. I'm concerned about the YouTube platform as a whole. We would like to see the platform succeed. And I'm concerned that this massive overreaction, which appears to include lies on the part of Maza about the source of the harassment and doxing. Again, I have no problem with Maza being upset with with harassment and doxing. We've seen a little of that ourselves, but I would never go so far as to blame an unconnected person, in other words, Steven Crowder, with the behavior of their fans. I can see the difference between a rabid fan and a, sort of, I don't want to speak with out of turn. I don't want to make assumptions for Steven Crowder, but I didn't see anything today to suggest that he wants Maza to be harassed. Now, what happens if I want to criticize Maza? So tell me how this works. If I want to go and criticize Maza, if I disagree with Maza's viewpoints, because Maza's an author, he writes for Vox. If he authors an article and publishes it, and I don't like it, and I criticize it, where is the threshold? If I say that his opinion is stupid, is that homophobic because I've criticized a gay man? I don't think so. But there's going to be a line here someplace. This is the purpose of hyperbole. Hyperbole is a tool so that you can find the thresholds. So if Crowder had said that, let's use me as an example. If I said that Maza was stupid for having a certain opinion in an article, is that homophobia? No. If I call Maza a queer author when it's not really connected with the thing, like maybe he's written an article about the latest tech something or other. But what if I call him a queer author and he has written an article about an LGBTQ related issue? Now it's sort of relevant, right? Now what if I think he's being stupid and I call him a stupid queer? Am I being homophobic? If I think his opinion is stupid, he has called himself a queer, he's writing an LGBTQ article, and I think it's relevant, am I suddenly now homophobic? So these are all wonderfully complicated questions, and pretty much why I don't think that's the threshold for deplatforming someone from YouTube. Again, go watch Crowder's videos. They really aren't that bad. It's not even as bad as Rush Limbaugh or Glenn Beck. It's along those lines, though. It's like if there's like a diagram, like it's on that's the direction of the velocity, but he doesn't quite have the speed element going. Like he's not going as fast as Rush Limbaugh. He's not driving Thelma and Louise off the cliff at the end. He's just like putting along, going, I'm gonna do the same thing. So that's what that is. Blackleaf, do you want to respond to any of that? Show us yet another alternative viewpoint? What do you think's going on here?
Well, I'm a little bit surprised that YouTube isn't actually trying to take credit for this policy rolling out at the same time the controversy is happening, because I would think that they could spin this whole new ban that they're doing as being responsive to the Vox thing and therefore get some credit that perhaps they didn't earn, but therefore they could make themselves look better. So the fact they're trying to distance themselves seems like a strange PR move to me.
Well, I think they're trying to take credit for the supremacist and hateful content policy guidelines enforcement that apparently just started today. And I can't really see any evidence that it didn't start today or whatever, that it wasn't planned in advance and then started today, because it appears that they've been taking down a lot of channels, and they probably couldn't do that by just pressing a button and not having done at least a few days or weeks or maybe even months of planning. But what I'm concerned about is whether the scorched earth policy that we've seen from YouTube in the past is going to be applied here. There was a quick fall off. It seemed like there was the ban hammer came down, a number of people complained, and now I've seen less complaining. But also, we've been here for 30 minutes, so I haven't been on Twitter for 30 minutes now, checking.
And the other thing that they're part of the policy that's slightly concerning to me from even legitimate, well, legitimate free speech angles, let's put it that way, is the policy dealing with like well-documented events and denialism of that. So 9/11 was an example that they gave, and the Holocaust was an example they gave. But I'm not 100% sure exactly what that means, because, you know, without denying the Holocaust, you could have legitimate arguments about things that occurred and whether, you know, certain things occurred. So, I mean, it's not like every fact, even about the Holocaust, is 100% well established. So I don't know what that means to be denialist.
Do you remember that one time when I asked a question on live stream about 9/11 and just basically got completely roasted by the audience as like this major conspiracy theorist because I literally asked one question? And it wasn't really a terribly offensive. I forget what the question was even, but it wasn't like, you know, how come this? It was more so like, you know, I wonder how our government couldn't have done something or whatever. It was more of like a, you know, just a general like, this doesn't make sense. Like, you know, they saw it coming and they had time to stop it, and then the U.S. government didn't seem to stop it. So what's going on there is just really my question. And I got jumped on as a major conspiracy theorist, when really I'm not trying to spread any misinformation, just rather asking questions. There was a lot to that tragedy, and there's a lot of things that don't make sense still. But let's see.
Yeah, so I don't know. So like the Armenian genocide was another thing that people.
Oh yeah, I saw that was bringing up. Yeah,
because, you know, whether to what degree it occurred and whether or not it's a genocide are obviously somewhat subjective calls. And so I don't know what it means to be in denial about that.
Yeah, and it's not like there's one guy sitting in a think tank somewhere who's like, no, I'm the guy who tells you whether it's a genocide. Like, that's not how that works. Just like you know, there's not one guy sitting in some fairness and justice department telling YouTube, you have to be just and fair about this. No, it's YouTube people meeting in a conference room or via telephone or via video chat or something and saying, well, this is how we're going to handle this. Right. And they could get it wrong too, as we've been very frustrated with sometimes in the past. One of the reasons I'm passionate about this is we've gotten caught up in these purges, and fortunately so far, knock on my table here, it appears we're not connected to this purge, but I'm just waiting for us to be involved in the next Adpocalypse. We've already seen our revenue drop by about half since December, and we're fighting to try and keep even that. It dropped down to about 1/3. It dropped by 2/3 to about 1/3. And that's scary for us. We'd like to be able to maintain our revenue. I've started to pay people, and people are starting to rely on getting paid. And, you know, I'd rather not just have to call the whole thing quits. And we don't have to declare bankruptcy or anything, because we run off of cash right now. There's no credit, there's no loans involved in this organization. So if we had to shut it down, we'd shut it down while we still have cash in the bank. Yeah. But that's what we're concerned about, is if the standard really is that Carlos Maza can say, Crowder harassed me and doxed me for 2 years, and that gets just eaten up by everybody, and then when YouTube comes back and says, wait a second, we analyzed the videos and we don't see anything more than a few homophobic, quote-unquote hurtful insults, then why are we accepting that? Why are we all overlooking Maza's lies to try, and then
part of the
should we connect this to the Adpocalypse that's happening?
Crowder was using terms that Maza himself had used to describe himself.
That is part of the problem I have.
That Crowder called him an anchor baby, which is a term he's used to describe himself.
Yeah, and Kaylee was telling me that even the lispy queer thing is something that Maza had said. I only saw the queer part, but it is possible that Maza had called himself a lispy queer. There seemed to be some self-reflection there. So that belies then, why would he say these are all harassing and hurtful things, but he's called himself those things? Now, I get that's not the same thing as him telling Crowder, please call me a lispy queer. I get that. It's not the same thing. Yeah. And I get that it's possible to call somebody a name that they want to be called, or a name they've called themselves. Or maybe he meant he's a lispy queer in a derogatory way when he called himself that, and so he doesn't want other people to call himself that. But Wait a second here. Are we really having this level of conversation about whether Crowder's entire effort should be banned from YouTube? Or at the very least should be demonetized? Now, demonetization is what happened. YouTube confirmed, and I'm going to use the word confirmed because my research showed that Crowder had been demonetized before. Mostly, all of his videos basically were demonetized. I don't know if there were some that got through or how many, but the research I did seemed to show that the platform was already demonetized. That's why he has to do the mug club at $65 or $99 or whatever that is, and why he has to get revenue from other places. And look at us too. We have to ask for support from Patreon and sponsors and all that through you guys, because YouTube's revenue just doesn't pay for our efforts.
To the extent that they're trying to ban people who are advocating for racial superiority, I'm hard pressed to defend that because there's a lot of ugliness. But I do worry about the implications of that in sort of where that leads down the line.
If it's done correctly, then it should be fine. But at the same time, that's an awful lot of power you're giving to one very small set of individuals to decide who has the correct political viewpoints or not. If you're a conservative, YouTube will now be deciding whether your conservative viewpoints are too conservative or not. And yes, there certainly is a point where it reaches either overt or hidden white supremacy or any racial supremacy. It doesn't have to be just white supremacy, but any racial supremacy is bad. Any homophobia, So then there's another question. So this means that if I have questions about my sexuality, let's say I'm a young man, because I was at one time growing up confused about his sexuality because I felt bisexual thoughts, but this was more or less frowned upon in my religious group. So I would pretend that I wasn't interested in any men or boys or anything like that when I was a boy. I was also interested in people my age, is what I mean. And so if I go on YouTube and I say, I don't understand these gays, they want me to do this and this, but I feel like doing this and this, have I now said a homophobic thing and I deserve to be deplatformed and banned when I'm really just a young man confused about my sexuality? So now someone at YouTube is going to be deciding which young men and women are simply confused about their sexuality and which young men and women have the wrong political beliefs or the wrong understanding of their own sexuality, or are simply outright homophobic or supremacist oriented. A small group of people at YouTube is going to be making this decision, and that's what scares me, because what if you're that person in between, what we would call the marginalized case? What if you're that person who's not clearly the white supremacist, clearly the harassing stalker, cyberbully, homophobic? What if you're a person who's just confused about their sexuality, and we've definitely seen some people get confused about their sexuality and sort of blame others for it? That's a normal part of coming out and coming up to understand your own sexuality. So are we really going to make that decision?
I have another question about how this policy is going to be enforced in practice. So I want to read it from YouTube's page. It says it's specifically prohibiting videos alleging that a group is superior in order to justify discrimination, segregation, or exclusion based on qualities like age, gender, race, caste, religion, sexual orientation, or veteran status. So when they talk about segregation or exclusion based on gender or race, I start thinking about feminist channels that perhaps argue for women's issues, and I think about men's rights activist channels that argue for men's issues, and I think about college-based organizations that have argued for women-only or certain race-only spaces on colleges. I mean, the way this policy is drafted, a lot of that would seem to exclude content that would be considered left-wing as well as right-wing. So I wonder if this is just going to be another battleground where YouTube is going to have to fight whether or not they're enforcing their policies with equal measures to left and right views.
They're going to be enforcing their policies as to whatever pleases advertisers and brings in revenue. Not even a joke. That's really what they're going to be doing, and that doesn't help any of us really here. So all we can really argue about is what we think of the Steven Crowder, Carlos Maza situation from the higher level.
I just see this policy being another war in the sort of feminist social justice warrior space that exists on YouTube, where they're going to be quoting this policy to each other a lot.
I am, I'm concerned about that too. I've already seen men's rights activists be interpreted as they must all be women haters or something, and there's certainly, again, a spectrum. There are definitely people who are too offensive for the platform, and then there are people who have questions about why things don't seem as equal as they're supposed to be. So how do you identify people who are wondering why men are victims of suicide, for example, or why men seem to have a tougher time in custody in court? These are issues that can be discussed. I'm not taking a position on these issues here in this discussion, but I'm saying these are things that can be discussed. So then again, a small group of people at YouTube will decide whether your question or your video about men's custody issues is gender phobic, or I don't know what the misogynist, or whether you're genuinely just confused or curious or something. Same thing with women's issues. There's going to be people reporting women's issues videos that hate on men or other people or groups, because some of those videos get a little bit extreme too. And there are occasional bad actors. It's the internet, we can find a bunch of them, but let's speak statistically. There's a low number of bad actors compared to the number of good actors. And those bad actors shouldn't spoil the whole bunch, whether you're men or women or gay or straight or Muslim or Christian or not, or left wing or right wing.
Yeah.
There's a Freudian slip for you, white wing. But you get where I'm going with it.
Yeah. So I hope it's going to do more good than harm, but
I like the fig question. It's not a question. You didn't ask the question, but you brought up a good point. So then there's this Che Guevara t-shirt holding a burning cigarette or blunt that Steven Crowder is allegedly selling. It's a red t-shirt with black print, and it's Che Guevara. I forget which controversy Che Guevara was part of. It was something in South America with, I really forget. I'm going to totally blow it if I try to say it. And he's holding a blunt or burning cigarette, and it says something about the F word. Socialism is for F word, or burdensome bundle of sticks. Now, supposedly the I thing is made to look like a cigarette or something, and so the argument is that it's socialism is for figs, and that is not offensive. Well, we all can kind of see what phrase the person is getting at. You know, the F word, burdensome bundle of sticks. I don't even like the word for that. I don't want there to be a sound bite on YouTube of me saying that word. That's my position on it. So, he's holding a fig from the bad YouTube quality. It looked like it was a blunt or cigarette, which would also be in the UK called a fag. I can say it there because I'm literally referring to a cigarette or blunt in the UK colloquial language, English language. But here in the US, I think he's referring to the burdensome bundle of sticks, which is the other version of that word that I don't want to say. Yeah. So what is that? Is that something that YouTube has to endorse? No, absolutely not. I don't think so. I think YouTube can tell him he's not allowed to use YouTube to sell those t-shirts, or not allowed to have those as items for sale in his YouTube merchandise shop, or just totally deplatform I said that wrong. Or just totally demonetize his channel until he fixes that, which I think is what's happened, and then he'll maybe get some monetization back after 30 days or something. So none of that sounds totally hyperbolic until you get to like a lot of the reactions that people were having, and a lot of the reactions are very hyperbolic. That, well, if there's an in-between ground, then Mr. French must be endorsing homophobia. How can you do this, Mr. French? When did you stop beating your wife? And I'm like, whoa, where's some of the evidence? And then I get responses like, I don't have to show you the evidence. I'm not going to do your job for you. I'm like, wait a second, you're the one who just responded telling me I was wrong. And then you're going to tell me you have no evidence and you refuse to provide it. Next was, I think, one of my responses. This whole thing, to me, has just been a terrible overreaction. There is certainly something to be done about Carlos Maza's harassment and doxing. That is not... the proper thing to be done there is not banning Steven Crowder or even demonetizing Steven Crowder for the alleged harassment and doxing. Let's be clear, the harassment and doxing was not driven by Steven Crowder. Some of his fans, maybe, sure. But are we going to deplatform PewDiePie because that one, what was it, school shooter or whatever, said subscribe to PewDiePie? What is that? Does that mean that PewDiePie endorses school shootings now? Well, yeah, if you read some of the freaking journalists that wrote some of these articles, you would think that PewDiePie had endorsed school shootings, which is absolutely not true. And you've got to watch for this crap, because your fellow human beings will attempt to trick you at every turn to profit off of you. And there is no need for that in our society.
Yeah, so I'm concerned. I'm not immediately concerned about the YouTube policy. I'm concerned about where it might lead. I'm concerned about its equal application, and I am more concerned about whether this Crowder situation will lead to a new adpocalypse that will cause people to withhold their advertising because of whatever. So that's really all I have to say about that.
Che Guevara was allegedly killed in La Higuera, which is Spanish for the fig tree. So it's a play on words, and yeah, it's probably meant to trigger people into thinking that you're saying the burdensome bundle of sticks slur. And I get why YouTube, and I still agree that YouTube can choose to demonetize the t-shirt sales or whatever, have him remove those from the site. But at the same time, this does back me up a second. That's sort of creative. If I created a t-shirt and I wanted to mock an offensive phrase, that's one way that I would think about doing that, is by using like a double meaning or something like that. And I don't, as much as that's offensive in the speech sense, I don't see that as being so offensive that it means he can't sell those t-shirts or that he should be removed from YouTube altogether. Again, YouTube can disagree with monetizing that specific message or his entire message. But if Che Guevara really was killed in a place called the Fig Tree, and they made a t-shirt of him holding a fig saying socialism is for figs, there's so many meanings in there, you really can't tell me that it has to be the most offensive one. That to me says you're not willing to understand the message involved before coming to a conclusion and making a decision. And the fact that people have been reacting the whole day, and I've been sitting here saying, like, well, wait a second, what does it really mean? Is he holding a cigarette, and isn't that like British for a cigarette? Everybody really they all felt like they had the answer, and nobody until here pointed out that he was killed in La Higuera, and that means the fig tree. That makes a lot more sense. So maybe, just there's a chance, maybe we withhold judgment and do some research on these things before we just make massive calls to deplatform. Carlos Maza should maybe not lie about whether he knows that Crowder is responsible for the doxing or the harassment. He should have been clear with YouTube that he didn't know whether Crowder was attached to the harassing and the doxing, and we should then be able to have a discussion about whether the name calling all by itself reached a level. It was apparently over the course of 2 years. So if every 2 months you get a video that mentions you and says you're a, little gay or a dirty gay or a lispy queer, is that targeted harassment? Because you got, I don't know, mentioned a dozen or so times, or maybe 24 times over the course of 2 years. Now, were there dozens more mentions that we didn't see because people just didn't have time to put them in the video, or maybe they didn't really add up? Yeah, possibly. But I didn't see any reporting. And I looked and I tried to find the evidence, and I couldn't see anybody who had really put together any list of these things beyond about 12 or 24 mentions of his homosexuality. In there were about half a dozen where he says something more than just the gay reporter. So I, again, don't see how that is so terribly offensive that it requires a deplatforming. Demonetization is scary, and then what I'm concerned about beyond that is the demonetization of others in either response or retaliation to this. But the more I hear, the more that's just a terrible coincidence on YouTube's part, terrible timing on their part, than an actual attempt at overreacting, or an attempt at reacting that I'm arguing is an overreaction on YouTube's part by demonetizing a whole bunch of people. Hopefully those people who got demonetized, which for all we know could include us at any moment now, will be able to appeal that and receive some kind of fair adjudication. That would be this lawyer's hope for it. But like I said, all of these judgment calls are going to be made by a small group of people at YouTube, and that affects all the people on the platform who ever made a joke that anyone could find offensive. So that's my take on it. I don't have any terribly great opinions beyond my little bit of self-protectionism and my upset at the original complaint being predicated on lies. I just don't see this whole situation as having a positive outcome when it was based on lies in the beginning. It took YouTube, believe it or not, YouTube had to be the entity trusted with watching Crowder's videos and seeing for itself the truth that Crowder was not targeting a harassment campaign at Carlos Maza, and that he was not doxing Carlos Maza, and that he had at most made off-color, offensive, homophobic jokes about Carlos Maza. So, let me know what your thoughts are in the comments below. This is a community-supported channel. I'll play our fly now. This is a community-supported legal education channel. Find out how you can support our mission at the links in the description below. Thank you to our supporters for the month of, what are we in, June now? Let's see if I can bring this up here. Thank you to John Steele, Gavin Barnard, Kyle Mudrak, Eevi, Michael Pearce, Terry Crisp, Richard Fournier, Spirit Bear, Jan Negrey, Daniel Perez, Aspernari, and Snorre Wisotzky. Thank you. You are my $50 plus supporters, and thank you to the $5 plus supporters and $50 plus supporters who are scrolling on the LED panel behind me, and we'll put you all in the description of the video below. If somebody doesn't want to be on this video's description or whatever for any reason because it's a kind of controversial topic, I completely understand. Just contact me and I'll take care of that. Any last thoughts? Blackleaf, thank you for joining us for this brief live stream. I guess it's not so brief at 55 minutes, huh? Otherwise, thank you all for joining us. I have a request for the puppies. Unfortunately, I don't have the puppies. They're with my parents. My parents have retired, and since they've retired, we've been more or less sharing custody of the dogs. The dogs like my parents' larger backyard, and my parents are 2 people, whereas I'm 1 person, and my parents aren't busy, whereas I work during the day and make these videos, and so we share the dogs. They have the dogs now, so I apologize. I don't have them. But here's what I can do. I can give you a link to an unlisted video. Just for those of you who are still watching, I will give you a link to our unlisted video with dog slow-mo and one wheel at the end, but otherwise 10 minutes of dog pool video there in the beginning. So 10 minutes of dog video and then slow-mo and me on a one wheel. And that's what that unlisted link is. So sorry, Onidius Mad Hatter. That'll have to be a good substitute. Anyway, I love you all. I hope none of this was meant to be offensive to you. I'm just super passionate about fairness and justice, and I did not want to see Steven Crowder treated unfairly or unjustly, nor do I want to see Carlos Maza treated unfairly or unjustly. Let's be clear about that. I just don't believe that his report to YouTube was honest. I'm certainly open to hear a different interpretation, but Carlos Maza's own words were that he reported the Steven Crowder situation as Steven Crowder having been the harasser. And I believe that's an outright lie and a total mischaracterization of the situation. Even if you're being harassed, you can say, I'm being harassed and I'm not sure if it's connected. Maybe he did and I didn't get that part or something. But I'm a little bit ticked at Maza for what I feel is the lying. But other than that, that's my major disagreement with the situation. So thank you all for joining me. I'm Leonard French, and I'll see you in the next video.